As a boy, I had a dog named Bill.
Oh my god. Right, let's talk Bioshock. The Bioshock franchise contains 3 games, Bioshock, Bioshock 2, and Bioshock Infinite. The franchise itself is very well known in the gaming community, and has had its fair share of media attention in relation to the game's themes. While praised and highly rated by many, Bioshock is no stranger to controversy, criticism by gamers, scholars, and society in general. And from everything I've looked at, I'm here to argue that the Bioshock franchise is too focused on reworking their mechanics in an attempt to please the players and commenting on profound societal issues as a narrative base, only to link these games under the quote-unquote Bioshock name with simple familiar assets. So let's start with the first game. Bioshock set the definition of a quote-unquote Bioshock game. Gameplay was rough, but as were most games in 2007. Even so, it was still a bunch of fun to carry around multiple weapons and use the magical abilities called plasmids. Rapture was a great place to explore. It was immersive with the propaganda around the place, the things the splicers would say, and the information you would get by finding optional and hidden audio diaries. Even so, sometimes it was too scary to explore as you were never quite sure what was hiding around the corner or in the vents above you. The narrative was fun to follow, though tedious at some points. The twist at the end, where it was explained that you had no agency this entire time and had been following orders in a predestined path, really hit well with audiences and seemingly came out of nowhere. This set the groundwork for what a quote-unquote Bioshock game is. Plasmids, big daddies, creepy places to explore, survival, some worldly criticism, and an unexpected twist towards the end. People love this game, and as with anything people love, there must be more of it because money. The most notable difference between Bioshock 1 and 2 is that Ken Levine, the director of the first game, was not at the helm for the sequel. 2K Games were still the publishers, but the developers changed from 2K Boston and 2K Australia to 2K Marin. This is one of the first sources that leads into the problems of why Bioshock games are so focused on being quote-unquote Bioshock games. 2K Marin were under intense pressure by 2K Games to ensure the sequel was as good, if not better, than the original, while additionally fixing the problems of the first game. In the last level of Bioshock 1, you play as a Big Daddy, and people thought that was fun, so why not play as a Big Daddy the entire game of Bioshock 2? Bioshock 1 ended with a sudden admiration for family for some reason. That was confusing. So Bioshock 2 starts with that from the get-go, and you're after the little sister you're connected to, Eleanor, who is hidden away by the Andrew Ryan wannabe Sophia Lamb. Gameplay was improved and updated graphics were put on display. Rapture was still fun to explore while still creepy at the same time. Everything from Bioshock was there, but something was missing. Some charm just wasn't there. Bioshock 2 by no means is a bad game, but it was not the Bioshock sequel people were looking for. It felt off, and that could be as the result of a copy-paste narrative, same setting, or that it simply wasn't made by the original Bioshock team. So to fix this, why not give the development back to the original team, create a new storyline in different setting? Surely this way we can make the next actual quote-unquote Bioshock game. So after Bioshock 2's mediocre reception, Ken Levine came back on as director and made the newest addition to the franchise, Bioshock Infinite. With another development hell, we can only imagine what Bioshock game we could have gotten, but the Infinite we know today was not what Levine was planning. Even so, as the father of Bioshock, I would imagine there was even more pressure on Ken Levine to make the sequel to Bioshock the community wanted, but the team fell short. The biggest flaw with Bioshock Infinite was the sudden focus on creating a marketable and competitive first-person shooter that could stand up to games like Halo and Call of Duty. Problem was, that took away from the charm of Bioshock 1 and 2, where killing people was only encouraged out of the desperation to survive. In Infinite, there are some big changes and new additions. You have a sprint button, a shield bar. Now you can only carry 2 guns. There are no health kits or Eve syringes to carry around. Eve has now been changed to salts, by the way. It is incredibly easy to kill people, and you kill so many people. It feels as though you are simply running from battlefield to battlefield, plus you know exactly when the fight is over as an auditory cue plays. Lastly and most notable, you have the companion and secondary character Elizabeth, who follows you around, can open tears, and finds ammo, health, and money for you. Now you could say these changes were improvements on the times, and you would be right. The game feels great to play, but it's these drastic changes that make Infinite feel even less like a quote-unquote Bioshock game. So how did they try to bridge the gap to make Infinite a quote-unquote Bioshock game? It's familiar images like the songbird made to look like a Big Daddy with the same protective qualities, or the plasmids rebranded as Vigors. While attempts to be clever callbacks, these assets are really on the nose and trying to tell us that this is a Bioshock game. So what about narrative? Bioshock 1 had a great twist and critique on objectivism. Bioshock 2 switched it up to collectivism. Both were interesting as they had the pros and cons about their respective themes. Infinite brought in racism, which I don't have any pros for. This intended questionable moral integrity theme is really forward. If it was something that sizzled on the back burner and ramped up as the game progressed, that would have been really interesting. But you can't really do that when you start the game like this.
Come on! Are you gonna throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days?
And then you have the ending, which is just, The ending says that the ideas of Bioshock can be told in any circumstance as long as it contains a lighthouse, a man, and a city, which to me is like the horrible film cliche of it was all a dream. It really dilutes the first two games' reveals and critiques on objectivism and collectivism. I feel like this is another way to ensure the Bioshock franchise is able to add more games under its belt by allowing whoever develops it to do pretty much whatever they want. Right, so now that we've looked over all three of the games and we're already seeing how this franchise is too focused on changing the mechanics for the players and using profound societal issues as a narrative base, I want to introduce to you what I would like to call the Bioshock template. Similar to the ending of Infinite, you need 5 things to make a quote-unquote Bioshock game. A lighthouse, a mysterious protagonist, a corrupt leader, a city with some questionable moral integrity that said corrupt leader runs, and a surprising twist at the end. Now I hear some of you saying, but Ross, this sounds pretty consistent. Isn't this what makes a good franchise? The same template for each game with familiar characters, places, and items? Well, yes, but also no. Take the Dishonored video game franchise, for example. In all 3 games, the player is in the same city that's been dealing with a plague. Sounds kind of familiar right now. Furthermore, the player can play as the same character throughout the series. The mechanics stay relatively the same and the look and feel of the world are the same throughout each game. The Dishonored franchise does follow a template and is also very aware of what it is capable of. It does not try and push too much into the idea of what a quote-unquote Dishonored game is. This is where Bioshock fails, as 2K Games has been too broad with what they put into the games, all while trying to sell it under the Bioshock name by adding simple quote-unquote Bioshock assets. Just because the game follows this template does not mean it should be considered a Bioshock game and given the reputation of that universe. With everything I've shown, from the original Bioshock to the attempts of another true quote-unquote Bioshock game with Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite, we can see that the games work well on their own. Each has its ups and downs, and are all in all fun to play, but to link all 3 of these games together under a single name and therefore universe really pushes the definition of what a Bioshock game is, and as a result, shows how the Bioshock franchise is too focused on reworking their mechanics in an attempt to please the players and commenting on profound societal issues as a narrative base, only to link these games under the quote-unquote Bioshock name with simple familiar assets.